My husband was gaming when his coworker messaged, "I miss you." I replied for him, "Come over, my wife's asleep." I need to tell you something that's been eating at me for weeks now, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. My name is Ayana, and I used to think I had it all figured out. I'm a senior partner at a luxury architecture firm in Atlanta, the kind of career I built from absolutely nothing. Our condo in Buckhead has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble countertops, and a gaming room that cost more than most people's cars. From the outside, we looked perfect. Successful black woman, devoted husband, the dream life everyone posts about on Instagram. But that Friday night, everything I thought I knew shattered in the glow of a phone screen. Marcellus was in his gaming cave doing what he did every weekend night, screaming into his headset, celebrating virtual victories like they actually mattered. At 35, he had the energy of a teenager and the responsibility level to match. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story isn't about who he was. It's about who I became when I finally saw the truth. That message from Connie, his 22-year-old coworker, didn't break my heart. It froze it solid. And what I did next? Well, that's why you're here. This is going to be a long story, and some parts are going to hurt to tell. But I need you to hear all of it. Every calculated move, every moment of rage turned into strategy. If you want to know how this ends, how a woman goes from doormat to destroyer, you'll want to stick around for every chapter. Hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happened when that doorbell rang. The 20 minutes between sending that message and hearing the doorbell felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. My hands were steady as I deleted the sent text from his phone and placed it back exactly where it had been. Marcellus was still shouting call-outs to his teammates, completely oblivious that his entire world was about to implode. I went to our bedroom, changed into my silk robe, the expensive one he always said made me look like old money, and waited. When the doorbell chimed, I watched him rip off his headset, confusion spreading across his face like spilled ink. He wasn't expecting anyone. His eyes darted to his phone, then to me standing in the hallway with my arms crossed. The panic that flashed across his face was delicious, but I kept my expression neutral, almost curious. I reached the door first. Connie stood there in a crop top and shorts that barely qualified as clothing, clutching a bottle of pink wine that probably cost less than my morning coffee. Her makeup was done up like she was heading to a club, not a married man's home. When she saw me, the color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint right there on our welcome mat. "Honey, look who's here," I announced brightly, my voice dripping with false warmth. "Your coworker Connie came by for a surprise visit. Isn't that sweet?" I grabbed her wrist and pulled her inside before she could run. Her skin was cold and clammy with fear. Behind me, I heard Marcellus make a sound like a wounded animal. What happened next? I'd been planning in those 20 minutes of waiting. I'd imagined screaming, throwing things, falling apart like women do in movies. But rage had crystallized into something sharper, colder. I was going to conduct this disaster like a symphony. I led Kaani to our living room, where Marcellus had frozen mid-stride, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. I walked past him to his precious gaming setup, the ultra-wide monitor still displaying his paused game. His teammates probably wondering where he went. I reached down and pulled the plug from the wall. The screen went black. I knew exactly what that meant. His ranked game, his rating, his precious stats all destroyed by the disconnect penalty. He made a strangled sound of protest, but one look from me silenced him. I poured myself a glass of Dom Perignon from our wine fridge, the good stuff I'd been saving. For Kaani, I grabbed a plastic solo cup from the recycling bin and filled it with tap water. I handed it to her with a smile that never reached my eyes. She took it with shaking hands. "Sit," I commanded, gesturing to our white leather sofa. They both obeyed like trained dogs. I settled into my Barcelona chair across from them, crossing my legs, taking a slow sip of champagne. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Connie kept glancing at Marcellus, desperate for him to say something, to fix this. But he couldn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on me, probably trying to calculate how much I knew, how bad this was going to get. So, I began conversationally. "Connie, how long have you been working with my husband? 6 months? 7? My voice was pleasant, like we were at a cocktail party making small talk. She stammered something about it being since January. I nodded thoughtfully, as if genuinely interested. That's wonderful. Marcellus talks about you sometimes, says you're learning a lot. I paused, letting that hang in the air. I bet you are. I stood up and turned on our smart TV. I'd queued up a documentary about workplace affairs and their legal consequences. The narrator's voice filled our living room, talking about harassment lawsuits, career destruction, financial ruin. I turned the volume up just a bit too loud. I thought we could all watch something educational together, I said brightly. Since we're having this nice impromptu gathering. Marcellus finally found his voice, hoarse and desperate. He started to say my name, but I cut him off with a raised hand. You know what? Ka'ani looks cold. Honey, why don't you get our guest some blankets from the hall closet? Maybe a pillow too. We want her to be comfortable. I watched him stumble to his feet, his legs barely working, and shuffle away to get the bedding like I'd asked. It was humiliating, reducing him to a servant in this twisted tableau. When he returned with his arms full of our expensive throws, I made him arrange them on the couch next to Ka'ani, like he was preparing for an innocent sleepover. Then I started talking about our anniversary plans. Completely fabricated, of course, but they didn't know that. I went into elaborate detail about the vow renewal ceremony I was supposedly planning for next month, the intimate dinner at the restaurant where he proposed, the surprise second honeymoon to Bali I had supposedly booked. I described the custom rings I was having designed, the photographer I'd hired, the handwritten vows I was working on. Ka'ani looked like she was going to be sick. Marcellus had tears streaming down his face silently. I talked for what must have been 45 minutes, never raising my voice, never breaking character. I was the devoted wife, excited about celebrating our love, completely unaware of any betrayal. The cognitive dissonance was torture for them both. Finally, I stood up and called an Uber for Ka'ani on my phone. I walked her to the door personally, my hand firm on her shoulder. It was so nice having you over, I told her, my voice saccharine. We should do this again sometime. Maybe next time you can bring your boyfriend. Oh wait, that's right. You don't have one, do you? The Uber pulled up, and I practically shoved her out the door. Through the window, I watched her collapse into the back seat, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I closed the door, locked it, and turned back to face my husband. The performance was over. Now came the reckoning. I stood in the doorway watching Marcellus for a long moment. He hadn't moved from his spot on the couch, still surrounded by the blankets I'd made him fetch like a trained dog. His face was blotchy with tears, but I felt nothing. The woman who might have pitied him died the moment I saw that message. Without a word, I walked to the coffee table and picked up his gaming controller, the expensive custom one with his gamer tag engraved on it. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, maybe thinking I was going to hand it to him, like we could pretend this nightmare hadn't happened. Instead, I raised it above my head and slammed it down onto the glass table with everything I had. It shattered into pieces, buttons, and circuit boards scattering across our pristine white rug. The sound echoed through our condo like a gunshot. He flinched but didn't speak. Good. He was learning. I sent that message, I said calmly, my voice steady despite the rage burning through my veins. I unlocked your phone while you were screaming at your little gaming friends, and I invited her here myself. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out my own phone. I'd been busy those 20 minutes before she arrived. Screenshots, dozens of them, all queued up and ready. I held the phone in front of his face, swiping slowly through the evidence I'd gathered over the past 3 weeks. You see, I'd known something was wrong for a while. The way he angled his phone away when texting, the new cologne that smelled expensive but that I'd never bought him, the suddenly enthusiastic attitude about going to the office when before he'd complained about the commute constantly. I'm an architect. I notice details other people miss. I notice when patterns change. 3 weeks ago, I installed monitoring software on our home Wi-Fi. Legal, by the way, since I'm the one who pays for it. Every text, every photo, every flirty message between them got backed up to a cloud server only I could access. March 15th, I said, showing him a screenshot. Dinner at Ocean Prime. You told me you were working late on the Henderson project. That's you and Connie in the background of someone's Instagram story, sharing a bottle of wine that cost $200. I swiped to the next image. March 22nd, the Tiffany receipt for that bracelet, the one you said was for your mom's birthday. Funny thing about that, your mom's birthday is in October, and when I showed her this receipt yesterday, she'd never seen that bracelet before in her life. Want to guess whose wrist I saw it on in her Instagram photos? His face went from red to gray. I kept going. April 3rd, the W Hotel downtown. You texted me you were at a conference in Savannah. But your credit card statement shows a $300 charge at a hotel 15 minutes from our house. Did you really think I wouldn't check? The evidence poured out of me like poison I'd been holding in. 6 months of lies, 6 months of him treating me like I was stupid, like I wouldn't notice our joint account bleeding money for his little affair. The coffee dates, the lunches, the gifts, all paid for with money I earned while he coasted in middle management at a company where his biggest skill was scheduling meetings. But the financial stuff wasn't even the worst part. "Show me your work laptop," I demanded. His eyes went wide. That told me everything I needed to know. "Now, Marcellus." He stumbled to his office and returned with the company-issued MacBook, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. I grabbed it from him and opened his email. I didn't even need his password. The idiot had it saved in his browser. What I found made the affair look like child's play. Marcellus hadn't just been sleeping with Connie, he'd been actively sabotaging the company's intern program to benefit her. Fake timesheet approvals, showing overtime she'd never worked. Performance reviews he doctored to make her look exceptional when her actual work was mediocre at best. Budget requisitions where he'd authorized bonus payments to her account for projects she hadn't even touched. But the piece de resistance. Email threads where he'd promised her a full-time position and a senior title when his department expanded, bypassing qualified candidates who'd actually earned it. All pillow talk and promises, using his position of power like a weapon. "You didn't just cheat on me," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You committed fraud. Corporate fraud, harassment, abuse of authority. Do you have any idea what the legal team at your company is going to do when they see this?" He tried to speak, to explain, to make excuses. I held up a hand to silence him. "I met with Lysandra this afternoon," I continued. Lysandra, my best friend since law school, who'd become one of Atlanta's most ruthless corporate attorneys. She's already reviewed everything. The fake overtime, the embezzled bonuses, the quid pro quo sexual harassment. That's what this is, by the way, when a supervisor promises job benefits in exchange for a sexual relationship. I pulled out another document from my robe pocket, this one printed on expensive legal letterhead. "This is a demand letter for the $42,000 you've taken from our joint account over the last 6 months. Every dinner, every gift, every hotel room. I have receipts for all of it. That money came from my earnings, from my firm, from projects I designed and executed while you were playing video games and playing house with a girl barely old enough to rent a car." I unfolded a second document. "And this. This is the promissory note you signed 3 years ago when I lent $40,000 to your parents for your father's heart surgery. Remember how grateful they were? How your mom cried and called me an angel? I never wanted to collect on that. I loved your parents. But you just made this about money, so now everything's about money." The blood drained from his face. "You can't. My parents don't have that kind of. I can, and I will. You have 30 days to begin payment arrangements or I file a civil suit. I've already had the papers drawn up." I walked to the closet by our front door and pulled out my Goyard suitcase, already packed. I'd done it that afternoon after my meeting with Lysandra, knowing this moment was coming. "I'm going to stay at Lysandra's loft," I told him. "You're going to stay here and think very carefully about what happens next, because Monday morning you have a choice to make." He looked up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "You can resign quietly, effective immediately, and cooperate with an internal audit. If you do that, and if you sign these divorce papers without contest, I might consider letting the criminal charges slide. Or you can try to fight this, and I'll make sure every executive in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your career won't just end, it'll be obliterated." I dropped the divorce papers on the coffee table next to the remains of his gaming controller. Oh, and one more thing. I walked to his gaming setup and picked up his headset, the $2,000 professional-grade equipment I'd given him last Christmas. I walked to our balcony door, slid it open, and without ceremony, threw it over the railing. We were 14 floors up. I didn't wait to hear it hit the ground. "That's what your promises are worth to me now," I said. I grabbed my suitcase, my laptop bag, and my dignity, and I walked out of that condo without looking back. Behind me, I heard him start to sob, loud and ugly. The sound followed me all the way to the elevator. But by the time the doors closed and I started descending, I wasn't crying. I was planning. Because this was just the beginning. Lysandra's loft in Midtown was everything my Buckhead condo wasn't. Industrial, minimalist, honest, exposed brick, concrete floors, abstract art that actually meant something instead of matching the couch. When she opened the door at midnight, she already had 2 glasses of red wine poured and a legal pad covered in notes. "Come in, warrior," she said, pulling me into a hug. "We have work to do." That's why I loved her. No platitudes, no, "Are you okay?" Nonsense, just action. We stayed up until 4 in the morning building the case. Lysandra pulled up Marcellus' company on her laptop, navigating to the employee handbook and corporate ethics policies. She'd already made calls to her network, getting the inside scoop on how his company handled misconduct complaints. "The key is timing," she explained, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. "You don't just want him fired, you want maximum impact. Monday morning, 9 a.m., when the executives are fresh and the optics matter most." She walked me through the documentation we'd need. The email evidence from his laptop, which I'd forwarded to my personal account before leaving. The bank statements showing the fraudulent expenses. The comparative analysis she'd run showing Kaani's actual work performance versus the inflated reviews Marcellus had given her. But Lysandra had found something even I'd missed. "Look at this," she said, turning her screen toward me. It was the company's project billing system, which apparently she'd gotten access to through a former colleague who worked in accounting there. Connie's been listed as a contributing team member on 4 major projects in the last quarter. See these billing codes? Each project shows client charges for 30 to 40 hours of her time. "Okay," I said, not quite following. "Ayana," I pulled the actual security logs. The days she was supposedly billing time to these projects, she wasn't even in the office. I cross-referenced with the calendar you showed me, the one where Marcellus logged fake business trips. The realization hit me like ice water. They were together on company time, billing clients for work that never happened. "That's fraud against the clients," Lysandra confirmed. "That's not just a firing offense, that's criminal. That's the company's legal team going into full damage control, throwing everyone involved under the bus to avoid a lawsuit." She pulled up another window, this one showing Connie's social media accounts. And your little homewrecker wasn't exactly subtle. Look at these location tags. March 15th, the night they were at Ocean Prime. She posted a photo of her dinner with the caption, "Date night with my favorite person," and tagged the location. March 22nd, she's wearing that Tiffany bracelet in a selfie, captioned, "Spoiled." April 3rd, check out this Instagram story from the W Hotel. Every piece of evidence was public, time-stamped, geotagged. She documented her own affair like she was proud of it, probably never thinking the wife would see it, would care enough to look. "She's young and stupid," Lysandra said, not without a hint of pity. She thought she was special, that he was going to leave you for her. She had no idea she was just convenient. "Do you think he actually loved her?" I asked, then immediately regretted showing that vulnerability. Lysandra looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Ayana, men like Marcellus don't leave their wives for their mistresses. They don't love anyone but themselves. He loved that she made him feel important, like he was some prize instead of a middle-aged man coasting on his wife's success. The second this gets hard, the second there are actual consequences, watch how fast he throws her under the bus." She was right, of course. She usually was. We spent the rest of the night crafting the email. It needed to be professional, devastating, and impossible to ignore. Lysandra wrote it like the legal artist she was, each paragraph building to an inescapable conclusion. We included PDF attachments of everything: the fraudulent timesheets, the doctored reviews, the billing discrepancies, the email evidence of their relationship, even screenshots from Kaani's Instagram showing her wearing company-paid gifts. But Lysandra added one more element I hadn't thought of: a formal complaint, not just about Marcellus, but about the systemic failures that had allowed this to happen. She framed it as a whistleblower concern, pointing out that if one mid-level manager could manipulate intern programs and billing systems this easily, what did that say about the company's oversight? "You're giving them a gift," she explained. "You're showing them the problem and offering them the solution. Fire everyone involved, audit the department, prove to clients that they take ethics seriously. They'll thank you for this, even as they're escorting your husband out of the building." Saturday and Sunday blurred together. Lysandra had to work on a client case, but she set me up at her second desk with her paralegal's login credentials. I spent the weekend digging deeper, finding more evidence, building an unassailable wall of truth. I also called Marcellus' mother. That conversation was one of the hardest of my life. Margaret had always treated me like a daughter, had welcomed me into their family with open arms when Marcellus and I got engaged. She'd been at our wedding, crying happy tears, had called me every Sunday just to chat, had knitted me a blanket when I made partner at my firm. "Ayana, honey, what's wrong?" She answered on the second ring, immediately hearing something in my voice. I told her everything. The affair, the fraud, the money he'd taken from our account. I told her about the promissory note, about how I'd never wanted to use it against them, but how Marcellus had left me no choice. She was silent for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her take a shaky breath. "That boy," she said, her voice thick with disappointment. "That stupid, selfish boy. His father and I raised him better than this. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I never wanted—" "No," she cut me off firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. What he did was unforgivable, and you have every right to protect yourself. The money you lent us, we'll find a way to pay you back. It'll take time, but we will. That's not your burden to carry." I started crying then, the first tears I'd allowed myself since this nightmare began. "I don't want to lose you," I admitted. "You and Marcus, you've been more family to me than my own parents ever were." "And you'll always be family to us," she said firmly. "My son's actions don't change what you mean to us. When this settles, you call me and we'll have Sunday dinner like always. Without him." After we hung up, I sat in Lysandra's guest room and let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, fixed my hair, and got back to work. Sunday evening, Lysandra and I reviewed the email one final time. It was perfect, professional, devastating, impossible to defend against. We had it scheduled to send Monday morning at 8:59 a.m., 1 minute before business hours officially started. "You ready for this?" Lysandra asked, her hand hovering over the trackpad. I thought about Marcellus, probably spending the weekend panicking, maybe calling Kaani, maybe trying to figure out how to spin this. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for him, covered for him, built him up when he hadn't earned it. I thought about the woman I'd been on Friday night, naive enough to think my marriage was solid, and the woman I'd become. "Send it," I said. Lysandra clicked the button. The email whooshed into the void, carrying with it the end of Marcellus's career, his reputation, his comfortable life. We clinked our wine glasses together. "To the truth," Lysandra toasted. "To consequences," I replied. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. I didn't sleep Sunday night. At 8:55 a.m. Monday, I was sitting in Lysandra's living room, both of us staring at our laptops like they were about to explode. We'd CC'd the email to the CEO, the Chief Compliance Officer, the head of HR, and the General Counsel. 4 people who had the power to burn Marcellus's world down. At 9:03 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, Atlanta area code. Lysandra nodded at me. Let it go to voicemail. Let them sweat. But at 9:07, they called again. And at 9:11. By 9:15, I had 6 missed calls and my voicemail was full. Lysandra finally gave me the go-ahead to answer the next one. "This is Ayana. Mrs. Patterson, this is Diane Chen, General Counsel for Sterling & Associates." Her voice was crisp, all business, but I could hear the underlying stress. "I need you to come to our offices immediately. We're convening an emergency meeting regarding your complaint." "I'm not Mrs. Patterson anymore," I corrected coldly. "I'm going back to my maiden name, Ayana Winters, and I'll be there at 10 with my attorney." I hung up before she could respond. Lysandra was already changing into her power suit, the navy Armani that made opposing counsel nervous. "Game time," she said with a predatory smile. Sterling & Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Atlanta. I'd been there exactly once, at a company holiday party where Marcellus had introduced me to his coworkers as his successful architect wife, basking in reflected glory. Now, I was walking back in with a lawyer and a metaphorical bomb. They ushered us into a conference room immediately. No waiting, no small talk. The general counsel was there, along with the CEO, a woman named Patricia Sterling who'd built the company from nothing. The head of HR, the compliance officer, and two other people I didn't recognize, but who had the look of internal investigators. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Patricia Sterling began. She was about 60, with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded rooms. "We've reviewed your email and the attached evidence. These are serious allegations." "They're not allegations," I said calmly. "They're documented facts." Lysandra slid a bound folder across the table. "This is a comprehensive report of every fraudulent transaction, every falsified document, every ethical violation. It's organized chronologically and cross-referenced with company policies that were violated. You'll also find a timeline of the inappropriate relationship between Mr. Patterson and Ms. Harper, including evidence of quid pro quo arrangements that constitute harassment under federal law." I watched Patricia Sterling flip through the folder, her expression darkening with every page. The HR director looked like she might be sick. "How long has this been going on?" Patricia asked quietly. "Based on the earliest evidence I could find, approximately 6 months," I replied. "But I only discovered it 3 weeks ago." "And you waited until now to report it?" Lysandra jumped in before I could answer. "My client needed time to gather comprehensive evidence and consult with legal counsel. She wanted to ensure that when she came forward, there would be no ambiguity about what occurred. As you can see, there isn't." The compliance officer, a thin man with glasses, was scrolling through something on his laptop. "The billing discrepancies alone are grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges. If clients discover they were charged for work that wasn't performed, we could face a class action lawsuit." "That's why we included that analysis," Lysandra said smoothly. "To give you the opportunity to self-report and remedy the situation before clients discover it on their own. Transparency now prevents catastrophe later." Patricia Sterling closed the folder and looked directly at me. "What do you want, Ms. Winters?" It was a test. She was checking if I was here for revenge or a payout. "I want justice," I said simply. "I want appropriate consequences for fraud, harassment, and abuse of authority. I want your company to acknowledge that these systems failed and to fix them so this doesn't happen to someone else. And I want the satisfaction of knowing that actions have consequences." "You're not seeking financial compensation from the company?" "No," I said firmly. "My legal claims are against my soon-to-be ex-husband personally. This complaint is about your company's ethical obligations and legal liability. I'm giving you the chance to clean your house before the state regulators do it for you." I could see Patricia Sterling reassessing me in real time. I wasn't a scorned wife looking for a payday. I was a professional woman protecting other women from the same abuse. The HR director finally spoke up. "We'll need to conduct our own investigation." "Of course," Lysandra interrupted. "But given the clear evidence of ongoing fraud affecting client billing, we'd recommend immediate suspension of both employees pending that investigation. Every day they have access to company systems is a day they could destroy evidence or create additional liability." Patricia Sterling nodded slowly. "Agreed. As of this moment, both Mr. Patterson and Ms. Harper are suspended without pay pending investigation. We'll be conducting interviews starting today." She turned to one of the investigators. "Get building security on the line. I want both of their access badges deactivated immediately. Arrange for IT to secure their computers and phones. No one accesses those files without documentation." Things moved fast after that. They asked me detailed questions about what I'd witnessed, what I'd found, how I'd discovered it. I answered everything honestly, sticking to facts, avoiding emotion. Lysandra occasionally interjected to clarify legal points or to redirect questions that were too invasive about my marriage. After 2 hours, Patricia stood up and offered me her hand. "Ms. Winters, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I'm sorry that our company's failings affected you personally. We'll be in touch as the investigation proceeds, and I want you to know that we take these matters with the utmost seriousness." As we were leaving, she pulled me aside privately. "Off the record," she said quietly, "I built this company on principles of integrity and respect. What your husband did violates everything we stand for. He won't work in this industry again if I have anything to say about it." I believed her. Lysandra and I were back in her car when my phone started blowing up. Marsalis calling over and over. I sent every call to voicemail. Then a text came through. "What did you do? They just escorted me out of the building like a criminal. My badge doesn't work. Please call me. We can fix this." I showed the text to Lysandra. She snorted. Block him. All communication goes through lawyers now. Oh, but I didn't block him yet. I wanted to see him panic. I wanted to watch him realize that the comfortable life he'd taken for granted was gone forever. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I saw it was from Kaani's phone. You're a psycho bitch. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. I actually laughed out loud. Lysandra looked over. Curious. The mistress is big mad, I said, showing her the text. Screenshot it, Lysandra advised. Add it to the harassment documentation. These people really don't know when to stop digging. I screenshotted the text and forwarded it to Diane Chen at Sterling & Associates with a simple note. Continued pattern of poor judgment from Ms. Harper. That evening, Lysandra and I ordered Thai food and opened a bottle of Sancerre. My phone kept buzzing with calls from Marcellus' number, but I'd finally blocked him like Lysandra suggested. The silence was beautiful. You did good today, Lysandra said, raising her glass. You walked in there like a boss and handed them their asses on a silver platter. I couldn't have done it without you, I said honestly. You made this possible. No, she corrected. You made this possible. You're the one who kept your head while your world was falling apart. You're the one who gathered evidence instead of falling apart. I just helped you organize it. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights twinkle through her floor-to-ceiling windows. Then my phone pinged with an email. It was from Patricia Sterling herself. Ms. Winters, I wanted to update you personally. After reviewing the evidence and conducting preliminary interviews, we've terminated both Mr. Patterson and Ms. Harper, effective immediately for cause. The termination paperwork cites fraud, falsification of records, harassment, and gross misconduct. Neither will be eligible for severance or unemployment benefits. We're also filing a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding the fraudulent billing practices. Thank you again for your courage in coming forward. Patricia. I read the email twice, then handed my phone to Lysandra. She read it and smiled. Terminated for cause, she said with satisfaction. That means no glowing references, no negotiated exit package, no unemployment checks. He's going to have to explain to every future employer why he was fired, and when they call Sterling & Associates to verify employment, they're going to get an earful. Is it wrong that I feel good about this? I asked. No, Lysandra said firmly. Consequences aren't punishment. They're natural results of choices. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with them. That night, for the first time since Friday, I slept soundly. No nightmares, no anxiety, just the deep sleep of someone who'd done what needed to be done. But I wasn't finished yet. The professional consequences were just the beginning. Now came the personal reckoning. The divorce papers I dropped on that coffee table Friday night were just the opening salvo. Tuesday morning, I met with Lysandra's recommended divorce attorney, a woman named Grace Morrison, who specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for protecting her clients' wealth. Walk me through the financials, Grace said, pulling out a legal pad. I'd come prepared. The Buckhead condo is in my name only. I bought it before we got married. The mortgage is paid from my account. He's never contributed a dime. Grace made a note. Good. That's separate property, non-marital asset. He has no claim. We have a joint checking account, but I can prove that 90% of deposits came from my salary. Over the last 6 months, he's withdrawn $42,000 for affair-related expenses. I have documentation for every transaction. Dissipation of marital assets, Grace said with satisfaction. Georgia courts don't look kindly on spouses who spend marital funds on affairs. We can argue that you're entitled to reimbursement plus additional compensation. I showed her the promissory note for the $40,000 I'd lent his parents. This predates the marriage, but he signed it personally, not jointly. It's a valid debt. Have you told his parents you intend to collect? His mother knows. She's agreed to a payment plan, but honestly, Grace, I don't want to destroy them financially. They're good people who got caught in their son's mess. Grace looked at me thoughtfully. What if we structure it differently? Marcellus is responsible for the debt. If he wants to protect his parents from collection actions, he needs to pay it himself. We can make that part of the settlement. He assumes full responsibility for repaying you for what you lent his parents, and in exchange, you agree not to pursue collection against them directly. Would that work legally? Absolutely. It's essentially a third-party beneficiary arrangement. His parents benefit from the agreement without being parties to it. He takes on the debt, and if he defaults, you can go after him, not them. I liked Grace immediately. We spent 3 hours going through every asset, every debt, every financial entanglement. The car I'd bought him, titled in his name, but paid from my account. The furniture in the condo, most of which I'd purchased. His gaming equipment, what was left of it after I'd destroyed his most expensive pieces. Even his retirement account, which was pathetically small compared to mine. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, not community property, Grace explained. That means the court divides assets fairly, not necessarily 50-50. Given your respective contributions to the marriage, your separate property, and his dissipation of marital funds for an affair, I'd say you're looking at keeping 90% of everything. What about his claims? Will he try to get alimony? Grace actually laughed. He can try, but alimony in Georgia requires proving need and ability to pay. He was gainfully employed until he got himself fired for fraud. That's going to be hard to spin as your fault. Plus, the affair works against him. Georgia courts can consider adultery when determining alimony. So he gets nothing. Oh, he'll get something. His clothes, his personal effects, maybe the car if you're feeling generous. But the big stuff, the condo, your retirement accounts, your business interests, untouchable. She pulled out a draft settlement agreement. This is what I'm proposing. You keep the condo, your retirement accounts, your business partnership. The joint checking account gets split based on contribution percentage, which means you get about 90%. He assumes the $40,000 debt to you for his parents' loan, payable over 10 years at 6% interest. He gets his car, his personal property, and exactly zero claim to your future earnings. What about his retirement account? Normally, you'd be entitled to half of what he accrued during the marriage. But given the dissipation of marital assets, we can argue that you're owed reimbursement first. His retirement account has about $30,000 in it. Coincidentally, that's roughly what he stole from your joint account. I say we offset the claims. He keeps his retirement account, you keep an equivalent amount from the joint account. Everyone walks away clean. It was elegant and brutal. He'd come out of this marriage with basically nothing except debt and his personal belongings. How long will this take? I asked. If he's smart, he'll sign quickly. If he fights, we go to court. And I promise you, a judge will give you even more than this settlement offers. The affair, the fraud, the financial misconduct, it's a slam dunk. When can we serve him? Grace smiled. I can have a process server at the condo tonight if you want. Do it. I left Grace's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The legal machinery was in motion, grinding toward an inevitable conclusion. Marcellus could resist, could fight, could try to make this difficult, but the outcome was never in doubt. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from Diane Chen at Sterling & Associates. Ms. Winters, I wanted to give you an update on our investigation. We've completed initial interviews and document review. The evidence you provided was thoroughly corroborated. We're moving forward with termination proceedings and have referred the matter to local authorities for potential criminal prosecution. Criminal prosecution? I repeated, surprised. The fraudulent billing constitutes wire fraud under federal law. The falsified documents are forgery. The use of company resources for personal benefit is embezzlement. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case now. I can't promise they'll file charges, but they're taking it seriously. Holy shit. I'd known his career was over, but the possibility of criminal charges hadn't fully occurred to me. What about Kaani Harper? I asked. Also terminated for cause. She's been cooperative in the investigation, claiming she didn't know about the billing fraud. Given her junior status and the power imbalance in the relationship, we're inclined to believe she was manipulated to some extent. However, she still violated company policy regarding workplace relationships and benefited financially from the arrangement. She won't face criminal charges, but her career here is over. Thank you for keeping me informed, I said. Ms. Winters, between you and me, what you did took courage. A lot of people in your position would have stayed quiet, tried to handle it privately. By coming forward, you've prevented this from happening to other interns, other young employees who might have been vulnerable to this kind of abuse. You did the right thing. I hung up feeling validated. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. Thursday morning, Grace called with news. He's been served. His attorney called me within an hour asking for a meeting. Already? He knows he has no leverage. His attorney took one look at the settlement terms and the evidence of dissipation, and I quote, told his client to sign the damn papers before it gets worse. So he's going to sign? We're meeting tomorrow to finalize. He's asking for one concession, an extra 60 days before the first payment on the parental debt is due. His attorney claims he needs time to find new employment. Tell him he has 30 days, I said. He should have thought about employment before he got himself fired for fraud. Grace chuckled. I'll convey your position. That evening, I was back at Lysandra's loft when my phone rang. Margaret, Marcellus' mother. Ayana, honey, I need to talk to you about something. Of course, Margaret. What's going on? She took a shaky breath. Marcellus came here this afternoon. He wanted money. Said he needed $20,000 for legal fees and living expenses until he finds a new job. My blood went cold. What did you tell him? I told him no. I told him that his father and I worked too hard for our money to give it to him so he can pay lawyers to fight the consequences of his own actions. I told him that you'd been more of a child to us than he'd been in years, and that if he thought we were going to fund a fight against you, he was out of his mind. I felt tears prick my eyes. Margaret, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. Ayana, that boy needs to learn that actions have consequences. His father and I are responsible for how we raised him, and clearly we made mistakes. But we're not going to enable him to hurt you more than he already has. He made his choices. Now he lives with them. Thank you, I whispered. No, honey, thank you for everything you did for us, for this family. You're always welcome here. Always. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of Lysandra's loft and let myself feel proud, not just of what I'd done, but of who I'd become. The woman who married Marcellus 5 years ago would have forgiven him, would have believed his excuses, would have tried to save the marriage. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who demanded better. Friday afternoon, Grace called with the news I'd been waiting for. He signed everything, no changes, no negotiations. The divorce will be final in 31 days per Georgia law. It's really over, I said, the reality sinking in. It's really over. Congratulations, Ayana. You're free. The divorce papers were signed, his career was destroyed, and criminal investigations were pending. By all measures, I'd won. But there was one thing left that I needed to do, one conversation that had to happen face to face. I needed to look Marcellus in the eye one last time and make sure he understood exactly what he'd lost and why. I arranged to meet him at the condo on Saturday afternoon to collect the last of my personal items. Grace advised against it, said I should send movers and keep all communication through attorneys. But this wasn't about being smart or safe. This was about closure. When I walked into that condo, it was like stepping into a crime scene. The coffee table still had glass embedded in it from where I'd smashed his controller. His gaming setup sat dark and dead. The empty space where his monitor had been like a missing tooth. The blankets I'd made him fetch for Connie were still scattered on the couch. He hadn't cleaned anything. Marcellus was sitting at our dining table looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Unshaven, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. Dark circles under his eyes. The confident, boyish man who'd spent every weekend gaming with his friends was gone. In his place was someone broken. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly when I walked in. I didn't respond, just started gathering my things. My artwork from the walls, my books from the shelves, my designer coffee maker from the kitchen. Everything I touched was evidence of the life I'd built, the standards I'd maintained, the success I'd achieved. And everything I left behind was his failure. "Ayana, please," he said after a few minutes of silence. "Can we just talk?" What's there to talk about, Marcellus? The affair? The fraud? The lies? Which particular betrayal do you want to discuss? I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am. I never meant for any of this to happen. I stopped packing and turned to face him. You never meant for it to happen? Or you never meant to get caught? He flinched. Both. I don't know. It spiraled out of control. No, I said firmly. It didn't spiral. You made deliberate choices every single day for 6 months. You chose to pursue her. You chose to lie to me. You chose to steal from our joint account. You chose to commit fraud at work. Those weren't accidents or mistakes. They were choices. She made me feel—" he started, but I cut him off. Don't. Don't you dare try to blame her for your decisions. I don't care what she made you feel. You were a married man. You had responsibilities, commitments, vows. And you threw all of it away for a girl barely out of college who made you feel like a big man. I never stopped loving you, he said desperately. I actually laughed at that, bitter and sharp. You don't love someone and do what you did. You used me, Marcellus. You used my money, my success, my reputation. I was the responsible adult who paid the bills and made the serious money while you played video games and played house with your intern. That's not love. That's parasitism. What do you want me to say? He asked, his voice breaking. That I'm a piece of shit? That I destroyed the best thing in my life? I know that. I know I fucked up beyond repair. But I'm losing everything. My job, my marriage, my reputation. I'm probably going to face criminal charges. My own parents won't even talk to me. How much more do I have to lose before you're satisfied? I set down the picture frame I'd been holding and walked over to where he sat. I looked down at him, this man I'd once loved, this man who'd once been my partner. You want to know what you lost? I said quietly. You didn't just lose a wife. You lost someone who believed in you when no one else did. You lost someone who paid for your father's surgery without hesitation. You lost someone who supported your hobbies even when they were expensive and pointless. You lost someone who made excuses for your mediocre career and your lack of ambition. You lost the one person who saw potential in you that you've never bothered to live up to. Tears were streaming down his face now. I know. God, Ayanna. I know. And you lost it for what? For a girl who's probably already moved on to the next guy who can advance her career? For a few months of feeling special? For the ego boost of having someone young and impressed think you were worth something? It wasn't about that, he protested weakly. Yes, it was. It was always about that. Because if it had been about actually being unhappy in our marriage, you would have talked to me. If it had been about feeling undervalued or disconnected, we could have worked on it. But instead, you snuck around, you lied, you stole, and you committed crimes. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed yourself. I picked up my last box of belongings. The divorce will be final in a month. The first payment on your debt to me is due in 30 days. Grace will send you the payment instructions. After that, we never have to see each other again. Ayanna, wait, he said, standing up. Is there any chance, any possibility that someday we could— No, I said flatly. There's no reconciliation, no second chance, no future where we're even friends. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. Alone. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Marcellus? The criminal investigation? I hope they throw the book at you. Not because I hate you, but because people need to learn that there are consequences for fraud, for harassment, for abuse of power. Maybe if you'd faced consequences earlier in life, you wouldn't be here now. I left him sitting at that table, crying into his hands, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The drive back to Lysandra's loft was quiet. I didn't cry, didn't feel sad. I felt cleansed, like I'd finally cut out a cancer that had been growing in my life. When I walked into the loft, Lysandra took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. It's done, I said. It's really done. How do you feel? Free, I answered. And I meant it. That night, we ordered pizza and watched terrible reality TV, the kind of mindless entertainment that requires no emotional investment. My phone stayed silent. No calls from Marcellus, no messages from his number. He'd finally gotten the message. Sunday morning, I woke up to an email from Grace. Thought you'd want to know, the DA's office has decided to file charges. 2 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of forgery, 1 count of embezzlement. Arraignment is scheduled for next Thursday. Your ex-husband is looking at potential prison time. Grace. I forwarded the email to Lysandra, who was making coffee in the kitchen. She read it and whistled low. Wire fraud is a federal charge. That's serious time if convicted. Do you think he'll take a plea deal? Probably. First offense, cooperating witness testimony from the company. He'll likely get probation and restitution if he pleads guilty. But it'll be on his record forever. No employer is going to hire someone with fraud convictions. Good, I said simply. Lysandra looked at me carefully. You're not the same person who walked in here 2 weeks ago. No, I agreed. I'm not. That person was too forgiving, too willing to see the best in people. She trusted too easily. And now? Now I know better. Now I demand better. Now I don't settle for anything less than what I deserve. Lysandra raised her coffee mug. To the new Ayana, may she never tolerate mediocre men again. We clinked mugs and I felt a smile spread across my face. Not a bitter smile, not a sad smile. A genuine smile of someone who'd survived a war and come out stronger. The confrontation I'd needed had happened. The closure I'd sought had arrived. And now, finally, I could move forward. But before I could start my new chapter, there was one last thing I needed to do. I needed to build something better than what I'd lost. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of my new loft in the West Midtown District, watching the sun set over the Atlanta skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was mine, truly, completely mine. No shared memories, no ghosts of a failed marriage, just clean lines and possibility. The divorce had been final for 5 months. Marcellus had taken a plea deal, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full restitution to Sterling and Associates for the fraudulent billing. No prison time, but a permanent record that would follow him forever. I'd heard through Margaret that he was working at a call center in Alpharetta, the kind of soul-crushing job where they monitor your bathroom breaks. He'd moved back in with his parents, was making payments on his debt to me, and had become a ghost in his own life. I felt nothing when I heard that. Not satisfaction, not pity, just nothing. He was a chapter I'd closed and left behind. Kayani had moved back to her hometown in Ohio. According to LinkedIn, she was working retail and had deleted all her social media. I'd heard she'd tried to apply to other intern programs in Atlanta, but found every door closed. Reputation matters in professional circles, and hers was toxic. Again, I felt nothing. She'd made her choices too. But my life had exploded with possibility. 3 months after the divorce, I'd been promoted to CEO of my architecture firm. The partners had voted unanimously, citing my leadership, my vision, and my integrity. The promotion came with a corner office, a significant raise, and equity in the company. I was now building some of the most prestigious projects in the Southeast. I'd also started speaking publicly about my experience. Not the salacious details, but the broader lessons about financial literacy, recognizing manipulation, and building boundaries. I'd been invited to speak at women's professional groups, at universities, at corporate events. My story had become a cautionary tale and an inspiration, depending on who was listening. Lysandra had helped me set up a small foundation focused on supporting women in architecture and helping victims of financial fraud. We funded legal aid for women going through divorce, provided scholarships for female architecture students, and offered workshops on financial independence. The foundation was my way of turning pain into purpose. Margaret and Marcus, Marcellus's parents, had remained in my life. We had dinner once a month, carefully avoiding any mention of their son. They'd made 3 payments so far on the debt Marcellus owed me. Even though I'd told them repeatedly it wasn't necessary, Margaret said it was a matter of honor, and I respected that too much to argue. On my 36th birthday, I'd thrown a party in this new loft. Lysandra, my colleagues from the firm, my college friends, even Grace Morrison and Patricia Sterling had come. It was a celebration of everything I'd built, everything I'd survived, everything I'd become. Standing in that room full of strong, successful women who'd supported me through the worst time of my life, I'd felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. Not just content, not just okay, but actually joyful. Tonight, 6 months after walking out of that condo for the last time, I was hosting a quiet dinner for Lysandra. Just the two of us, a bottle of expensive wine, and Thai takeout from our favorite spot. You know what I realized today? I said, settling onto my new couch with a glass of Chateauneuf du Pape. What's that? Lysandra asked, getting comfortable in the Barcelona chair she'd helped me pick out. I'm grateful it happened. Lysandra raised an eyebrow. The affair, the fraud, the complete implosion of your marriage. All of it, I confirmed. If Markelis had been a better liar, if I'd never seen that message, I could have spent another 5 years in that marriage, another decade, building a life with someone who was using me, who didn't value me, who thought I was too stupid or too complacent to notice what he was doing. So you're thankful he was an idiot? I'm thankful I woke up. I'm thankful I found my spine. I'm thankful I learned that I'm strong enough to burn my own life down and build something better from the ashes. Lysandra smiled. You did more than that. You built an empire. We built an empire, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have, she said seriously. I just helped you organize your rage. The strength, the courage, the ruthlessness, that was all you. I thought about the woman I'd been that Friday night, reading that message, making the decision to invite Connie over. I thought about the fear I'd felt, the anger, the betrayal, and I thought about how that woman had channeled all of it into action, into justice, into power. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you just confronted him quietly? Lysandra asked. If you just filed for divorce without exposing the fraud, without destroying his career? Every day, I admitted. And every day I'm glad I didn't. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about every other intern at that company who might have been his next target. It was about the clients who were being defrauded. It was about sending a message that this kind of behavior has consequences. You became the consequence, Lysandra said with satisfaction. Damn right I did. We clinked glasses and drank to that. Later that night, after Lysandra had gone home and I was alone in my loft, I stood at the window looking out at the city I'd conquered. My phone buzzed with an email notification. A prospective client, someone referred by Patricia Sterling, asking about a project. Another opportunity, another challenge, another chance to build something beautiful. I opened my laptop and started drafting a response. My fingers flew over the keyboard, confident and sure. This was my life now. Building things, creating spaces, making beauty out of raw materials. It was a metaphor I'd come to appreciate. The woman who'd married Marcellus had been raw material too. Talented but unsure, successful but undervalued, strong but untested. The fire of betrayal had forged her into something harder, sharper, more valuable. I'd learned that forgiveness is overrated. So is trying to understand why people hurt you. What matters is how you respond, what you build from the wreckage, who you become in the aftermath. I'd also learned that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about revealing the truth and letting consequences follow naturally. I didn't destroy Marcellus's life. He did that himself, choice by choice, lie by lie. I just made sure everyone could see what he'd done. And the biggest lesson, I learned that I don't need a partner to be complete. I don't need someone to validate my worth or share my success. I'm enough, all by myself, whole and powerful and free. If I ever do let someone into my life again, they'll be walking into a life I've built entirely on my own terms. They won't complete me, they'll complement me. And if they ever betray me, well, they'll find out exactly what the last guy learned, that I'm not the type of woman you underestimate. I finished the email, hit send, and closed my laptop. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, new opportunities. But tonight, I was just going to sit here in my beautiful loft, drinking my expensive wine, and appreciate everything I'd survived to get here. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Margaret. Thinking of you tonight, honey. We love you. Mom and Dad. I smiled, genuinely touched. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to love you even when they don't have to. I typed back, love you both. See you Sunday. And that, right there, was the real victory. Not the CEO title, not the financial success, not even the satisfaction of watching Marcellus face consequences. The real victory was building a life I actually wanted to live, surrounded by people who actually valued me. I used to think my marriage was the foundation of my life. Turned out, I was the foundation all along. Everything else, the career, the friendships, the success, I built that myself. Marcellus. He was just dead weight I finally had the strength to let go. And now? Now I'm flying. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, drop a comment and tell me your city. I'd love to know where this story reached you. And if you want to hear more stories of women who refuse to stay victims, hit that subscribe button because I'm just getting started.